All right, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. We want to welcome you all to an exciting session. We have an invited talk today, and our guest that we have here, who's joining us, is um, is Gregory, and Gregory Palovchik is a data science consultant at Nationwide. So I'll just read out a brief bio for Greg, and then we can hand it over to him. He has over 2 decades of expertise, and he brings a wealth of knowledge in geospatial intelligence insights, market research, data mining, analytics, and innovative software solutions. His distinguished career spans providing strategic insights to both the insurance sector and a broad spectrum of external clients, including local, state, and federal government agencies, as well as utility industries. Gregory's recent projects have made significant impact in the insurance industry, optimizing distribution channels and managing risks associated with climate-induced hazards through advanced geospatial intelligence. Furthermore, his proficiency in data mining encompasses the research, analysis, and interpretation of vast data sets, up to billions of records, offering unparalleled insights. So that was a brief bio that I read out for Gregory, and we're going to go ahead and hand it over to him. Greg, you're welcome to share your screen. Over to
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Well, let me shuffle some screens around here and go ahead and jump into the presentation. Thank you for the introduction. Let's see here, go to screen and then over to the Zoom and go to screen share. Let's see here, share now. Okay, did it come through for everybody?
Yep.
Excellent. Again, thank you so much. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to share some of the things that I've learned over the years with your students, Dr. Khan, and I look forward to, hopefully you'll glean some things from my experience that you can take away, or maybe it will spark some new interests in the field of geospatial data science and geospatial analytics. So. And since I'm presenting on Nationwide time and Nationwide template, I do need to make this disclaimer before we kick off the presentation. The contents here reflect my experience and insights as I've accumulated over the duration of my career. They're not public statements or opinions and or perspectives of Nationwide Insurance. And the presentation has been prepared with the intent to transfer knowledge and hopefully some wisdom to go along with it on the topic of geospatial analytics. So hopefully you can use these things to make the world a better place. So, yeah, thank you. A little bit about me. So I am a OU alumni, 96, 97, BSME and MBA. So certainly like this might raise the question, how am I qualified to speak on the topic of GIS and geospatial analytics? I happened upon this practice in my career early on, and kind of one thing led to another, and I've been doing it pretty much doing GIS work since 1999, so a few years. So all on the job learning. Maybe you'll find the content is less academic and more applied. That's kind of typical for a mechanical engineer, is to like application more than theory. But the theory is equally important. So 9 years in my first role, then 16 years at Nationwide. I started in August of 2007. I've been writing code for a long time, a variety of languages, some more cryptic. So earlier GIS platform from Esri, ArcView 3.2, you could script it using Avenue. I've written VBA, VB, C#, and now I write a lot of Python. I've also written a lot of SQL in my day as well, probably like for 10 years straight, and still write some now. I do both use Esri software and open source for my geospatial work. I grew up on Esri software, and hands down, like they're the most well-developed platform. So, and just a little bit about what I've been reading lately. Maybe the first one you can see there is spotlighting a little bit on social media. I like to think a little bit critically and philosophically about things, and then some of the other books here, political or religious or historic in nature. So yeah, a little bit about me. The presentation, so overview of what I intend to cover. So kind of the basics of geospatial analytics. We'll have a little audience participation in the beginning, and then talk some about a little bit of the theory from, I believe it's Walter Tobler, and then a little bit about the technology, some ethics, a little bit about the responsibility, jump into some geospatial concepts, highlight some self-learning resources, and then I have some sample maps put together. That hopefully we have time at the end. I'll share those. So, and certainly Dr. Khan, if I'm running a little behind, feel free to jump in and encourage me along, because the maps are the good part. So that's the where things begin to get interesting. So. So audience participation, take a look at the map on the right here. And then I've got a set of questions. So be curious to hear from some folks about, what does this map represent?
A lunchtime walk path
Yep.
and like the area around it.
Yeah. Yep.
I was thinking maybe like data from something athletic, like a run or a bike ride.
Yep. Yep. And the location.
The destination shows you the way how to head to the, I don't know, to restaurant or something.
Yep. Yep. So it's a lunchtime walk at a local park. And so what would you deduce about the I would call it the author of this GPS path representing a lunchtime walk? What sort of things could you conclude about that author?
You could specifically look at activity, comparing this to other maybe data from people who wouldn't be taking lunchtime walks, but you can see the duration of time as well as the distance that they're walking.
Yeah.
That the author is like not only a person who takes lunchtime walks, but someone who's like logging them, or like, I don't know, it reminds me of like Strava.
So maybe cares about data a little bit, keeping track of their performance. So great answers. If you were going to try and automate, some of these things, how might you go about doing that using a computer? So you have this image, and it's someplace, and it's got a path. How would you take this image and maybe identify the exact location, and then enrich that location and maybe the person that produced the data with information, from around there?
It looks like you've got a set of GPS coordinates taken over time. So there's probably GPS coordinates with timestamps in there that you could use as waypoints and reconstruct the path and collect data on it that way.
So if you had the underlying raw data, you could use that for spatial enrichment. What if you didn't have the underlying raw data? You just had the image. And somebody said, well, where was this at? And what sort of characteristics about the author could I maybe deduce from that location?
You have location of a park as well as some neighborhoods and streets that you can see within the image. You also have the image also shows like the duration and length of the walk.
Yeah. So maybe you could go to Google Maps and enter in some of the street names, and maybe a couple of the street names would be unique enough that you could identify the exact location, where this park is located. And then from there, if you had demographic information, you could, or even just using Google Maps Street View, you could get an idea of the type of neighborhood. And then with demographic information, you certainly could, start to build a profile of an individual who might have gone to this park in order to take a walk. So you now have a location, and you start to enrich that based on proximity of other collected data that is around that location, and you get some idea of the person who might have collected this information. So last question, and I super appreciate your engagement. Who owns the data that generated this map?
I think it's the Google Map app owns that data of the user, so not the user who actually walked that path.
Yeah. Yeah, so it depends on the terms and conditions of the app. So did the author of this, this map sign that over when they agreed to use the app? And certainly that's a theme, keeping the back of your mind as we go through the presentation, like who does the data belong to and what did they agree to? And oftentimes we just say, well, check the box and move on. But there's language there, and actual terms and conditions about these things that really matter. So yeah, great. So moving on. Yeah, thanks so much for your participation. So the basics, certainly the 5 whys, and I think it's now the 5 whys and the H. So who, what, when, where, and why, and then the and how. But the where is very important. If you pull the where out of the equation, you kind of don't have enough context to really understand some circumstances. And of course, there's the basic physical laws of the universe. We exist in a space-time continuum, and where is that space piece? So, where matters a lot. And then, of course, where has some implications that are very important. So things like access. So a simple example would be, do you live in the city or do you live in the country? And you want to go to the grocery store. Well, in the country, you might have to drive a half an hour. In the city, you might be able to walk 5 minutes. So, access to resources. Another is risk. If you live along the North Carolina coast, or you live maybe in like central Indiana, the risk from hurricanes would be different. Similarly, vulnerability, so where it has implications on vulnerability. Do you live in a high crime area or in a low crime area? So, that's kind of connected to risk, but, are you vulnerable to, to harm or other things that could cause difficulty? Influence, so, right now, we can communicate with people so easily around the world, but, it's probably easier for me to go talk to my neighbor than it is to go talk to somebody on the other side of the city, about, matters of which, we might want to influence one another. And then the last is advancement. you know, proximity to higher education. Again, like the internet's kind of broken that down, but oftentimes, you know, you need to be on site. And so if you're near, you know, near an institution that, you know, can help you advance in your capabilities or help communities advance in capability, there's a proximity dimension to that as well. So, so the application of math and computer science to display, quantify, and gain insights from geographic dimensions of reality is what I would call geospatial analytics. So, you know, ChatGPT, it's always fun to ask it a question. So I asked it, you know, why does geography matter? And, you know, here are some of the things that it responded with, you know, kind of an obvious list, but maybe some of them are not so obvious. You know, it helps us understand our world. You know, spatial data science and geographic information systems are applied to, you know, we'll get into it later, a whole list of domains, you know, from infrastructure management to population characteristics to disease control, you know, to risk mitigation. Just, you know, you think about something, there's probably a geographic dimension to it. Helps us understand environmental impact. You know, if there's a spill someplace, you know, you can model like where did that go and you know, who needs to be contacted. In Eastern Ohio, there was a train wreck last year sometime, and you know, there was a plume, and you know the direction of the wind, you can figure out, you know, geographically, you know, who's going to be impacted by that. Helps us understand cultural diversity. You know, it's a very good thing, or you know, maybe lack thereof in some places. It helps us, you know, model economic activities. So where is industry, you know, where is industry improving or, you know, contracting or expanding? Certainly political boundaries. So, you know, who pays taxes to whom, that matters a lot to government. Human migration, especially, you know, when there's crises and people maybe are fleeing countries, you know, there's a geographic dimension. Which way did they go and who are they going to, so that we can plan for resources. And then urban planning, you know, it's very integral to that. You know, where are we going to see growth? Are the roads, you know, the roads going to be able to handle the increased, you know, traffic demands, or is it going to create a bunch of congestion? And so planning, forecasting activities, you know, are highly geographically dependent. So geography is a canvas upon which human history, culture, and our interactions unfold. It's the lens through which we perceive our world and make informed decisions. So it was overall, you know, ChatGPT did a pretty good job of explaining why geography mattered. So Waldo Tobler, if you were to enroll any, excuse me, in any GIS or geospatial related courses, you probably will hear about this guy. So the first law of geography, everything is related to everything else, but near things are more related than distant things. So seems kind of obvious, but you know, it's good to have it formalized as a law. There's some, you know, some spatial concepts or analysis concepts that are highly related to or depend on this. I don't want to use depend because the first one is spatial dependence, but you know, there's a spatial interaction, which is, you know, what spatial dependence is, that is based on proximity. So it's distance between two things. And then there's spatial autocorrelation. If you want to dive into that, there's some links down at the bottom there. And then something like inverse distance weighting. So it's a mathematical method by which you can decay that, you know, that spatial dependence over distance. And then it touches on some surface generation techniques, which I'll talk more about that later on in the presentation. But so basically the first law of geography is fundamental assumption used in all spatial analysis. So if you yank out this assumption, then things kind of, you know, don't work. And then the second law, a phenomenon external to an area of interest affects what goes on inside. And I think that Tobler was trying to highlight the kind of the social sciences aspect of geography. And so if you think of, you know, a country that is under attack by a country next to it, like this external thing is going to cause the, you know, the country to do things to prepare, you know, and defend their area. You know, and I suppose like you could take that into maybe the social media space where, you know, you maybe have um, different ideas about things, you know, in a geography, and you have external influences that come in through communication channels to try and influence that geography one way or another. So there's, you know, it's primarily social sciences based, but I'm sure if we thought about it, you know, we could identify some non-social sciences applications as well. So a simple one might be, you know, you watch the Weather Channel, or there's a gentleman on YouTube by the name of Ryan Hall, y'all, and he tracks severe weather and primarily tornadoes. And if you see a tornado is coming in your direction, you know, it's not there yet, it's still externally, you're gonna change your behavior in order to prepare for that coming storm. So the technology, so covered the basics. The technology is known as geographic information systems. So it's applications or tools on which you can process spatial data and you can perform analysis. Lower right here, you can see some of the common applications. So Esri is probably the largest. Their software is very sophisticated. You have Tableau, also pretty sophisticated. More, you know, for dashboarding purposes. And then you have QGIS, which is the open source version. So if you wanted to try out a GIS application, you could install QGIS and go find some shape files and some raster layers, and, you know, be on your way, kind of doing some self-learning with GIS and geospatial data. But so GIS is a system that creates, manages, and analyzes and maps all types of data. And we'll touch on again some of those data types. And it gives you the ability to view all of these types of data in a single environment where you can control the symbology. You know, what does the layer look like and what does it represent? And turn layers on and off so that you can kind of drill into you know, the geographic information to learn new things. And it's highly data driven. I mean, effectively, I don't think you can use it without data. So, you know, a GIS without some information to feed into it is, unless you want to create data, you could use it to create data. But without that underlying data, you know, it doesn't really serve much purpose. This, I would say, I want to call this a short list of who uses GIS. But it covers a lot of industries. So education, health, insurance, of course, you know, insurance professional, we definitely use it. Manufacturing, petroleum, so on and on and on. Very common in government. You know, if you think of like the county auditor, you know, managing roads and property valuation and you know, whatever other infrastructure, you know, they might need to manage. Natural resources is another big one, very common in that industry. So GIS helps us understand what is where so that we can answer the question why. So I wanted to throw this in here. Maybe you've heard this term digital twin before, maybe you have not. If you never seen like CAD software, you know, you render, you know, a virtual model of a gear, you know, or an engine or something like that. Well, it's kind of just a digital twin. Like you feed it into the, you know, CAD CAM process and it cranks out this part, and now you've got the real part and you've got the virtual part. So it's kind of a digital twin. Well, we do that now with cities and, you know, buildings and and certainly this has been going on in the gaming industry for a long time. You know, I'll confess I've played Minecraft a few times, or maybe more than a few times, but you know, you can create these virtual environments, these virtual worlds. Well, we can do that with the real world. And so once we have a, you know, a model of geographic context, We can understand where am I, so you can fly into that world with some GIS tools and like walk around and look around without actually being there, and understand, perspectives. You can figure out what's nearby, what might be changing, and you can traverse that context, the digital twin. You have a couple images here on the right, to give you an idea of what it's like. The key thing that it enables, though, is the ability to perform simulations. And so whenever you perform a simulation, it's kind of like a what if scenario. So you've got a set of inputs and outputs, and you've got this process in the middle, which is contained by your geographic context. And so if I change the inputs and I put it into the geographic context, I might be able to model what the outputs look like. And so there's a lot of power in that if you think about like the implications. And certainly, doing that geographically requires, trying to model a very large context requires a massive quantity of data. But the power of simulation is still there. So you can evaluate the outcomes. Like that's kind of the key takeaway is perform simulation, inputs, process, output. What outcome is the one that is, the most desirable, depending on whatever your objectives are. So I think that, that kind of leads into this, this next point. Within my role in Nationwide, I participate in ethics type activities, and so my mind is in this space, and insurance is a social good, meaning like it's people gather together to put their resources into a pool to help those who happen to be impacted by unforeseen circumstances. And kind of the root of it was, farmers would gather together, like if a tornado came through and wiped out, one of the farmer's crops, like they would help that farmer out, from the pool of resources to, help them get back on their feet, or hail, or, fire or something. And so, there's this ethics, social responsibility dimension to the work here where, knowing where somebody's at or where things are at, and being able to glean insights from those things, like there's power, but with power comes responsibility. So, one of my favorite sayings is just because we can doesn't mean we should, doesn't mean we should. So I looked that up, and apparently like there's some more to that too. So just because we always have doesn't mean we always have to. Once we know better, we should choose better. So it always kind of begs a question when we contemplate an idea, and it sounds really good, but we should maybe step back from that and say, well, what are the implications of that? Like, is it something really we should engage in? And certainly, this is, I would imagine, this line of thinking is likely common, in the university setting, because we want to be thoughtful about the things that we learn and how we could use those to make the world a better place. So some of the ethical dimensions, privacy, bias and fairness, transparency and accountability, data security, consent and control, accountability for outcomes. Those are just, if you're thinking about a list of the ethical dimensions, this would touch on it kind of at a surface level. In the interest of time, I'm not going to dive into like the details of each of these things, but sometimes we find ourselves hungry for more information. I want to know. Sometimes we need to pause and ask the question, am I ready to steward the responsibility of knowing? Like a simple example, like a friend shares something with you in confidence, like, you could use that to help them out. Like maybe they're in difficult circumstance or whatever, or you could use that to, to maybe create more hardship for them. And so, we always have to ask the question, do I really want to know that? And so, and it's okay sometimes to say, well, I think maybe I'll pass on that, because there's risk. once you know, there's risks and liabilities, and it's important to weigh those things before you decide. So in the domain of social media, if you're gathering like, sentiment about a topic and you throw that onto a map, there might be very powerful insights to come out of that. But the question is like, how do I steward that information well? And use it for the right purposes. So, let's see, moving on. So geospatial concepts, pretty intuitive, like, location, direction, distance, and space. Of course, there's time to that too. But I didn't want to dive too much into spatial temporal analysis, because you have to get the spatial down first before you can jump into the temporal and combine the two. Excuse me. So location, position on the Earth. I like to put the for now there. I think maybe in one of the earlier slides, I talked about, I had a little blurb that said galactic coordinates. Not that I think we're going to Mars anytime soon, but as we try to venture out into the solar system, latitude, longitude aren't going to work for us anymore. We have to have some way to position ourselves beyond, like, just the planetary or planet coordinate system. Direction, so the orientation, which way are you going? So I start here, and I'm headed in this direction. If we look at the GPS map of the walk, you can see there's a path that was followed. Well, there's a direction associated with each point that was collected in order to stitch together that path. And it can be in motion, or it can be stationary, like it could be faced this way or this way. That's an orientation, somewhere around the 360 degrees of your heading. And then distance, is GPS point, GPS point, GPS point every second, how far apart are those GPS points. And then using those, you can start to construct areas or even three-dimensional spaces, where you can get to volume, so how much water is contained in Lake Superior. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's quite a lot because it's a very deep lake. But the geographic information system could be used to make an estimate of that. So using, I believe it's called bathymetry data. So spatial data abstraction, it's a representation of an object in the real world using data, a model in a map context. There's kind of an explicit definition, of that object. So there's a light pole here, on the street. It's got a GPS position, and it is there from, maybe 1990 through 2025. And it's on this, this position on the Earth. And of course, it's reversible. So you see it on the map, and back to the digital twin, you can go find it, out there in the world. So, either way. And then of course it doesn't, might not have irrelevant details that don't support the intended purposes of the map context. So I could have the street, I could have the street pole, but maybe in my map, I don't have any houses around that. You probably would want to have that, if we want to have street lights, but there's sometimes you leave out information on a map that just, it doesn't suit the purposes, that particular context. But and then you have discrete features and continuous features. So discrete, is the list here, where it's a thing in a place. The street is so long and so wide. And then you have more continuous features. So how is the wind blowing, on this particular day? It's a surface, across the landscape, and it's varies. It's not a single value. It's 0 to 50 miles an hour, depending on your location. So just some concepts for understanding spatial data. And then there's raster and vector data. So simply put, I'll start with vector data first because it's a little easier to understand. Back to the path, the walk. it's connecting the dots. So GPS reading, GPS reading, GPS reading. We call those vertices. And so like a single vertice would be a point, like a light pole. A street, would be a line, so you can have multiple GPS readings, like wherever the street ends. So it's a string of vertices, and then, a loop would be a connected string of vertices in which there's an area. And then there's this thing called a triangulated or regular network, which, can model volume. So connect the dots. Vector data is kind of connect the dots. You can do curves too, but simply put, it's connect the dots. Raster data is, imagine, you've got a bitmap, so an image, and you drape it over the earth. And so you've got a cell with, a value in each cell. And so maybe you want your raster to represent elevation. And so each cell is 10 meters by 10 meters. And, it's got an elevation value for that cell that's maybe, 1,000 feet above sea level. And that's, the ground's not that flat, but it's a way to generalize, the elevation so that you can get an idea of the landscape. And then just some data formats. I'll just leave this up here for a second so we can get the recording of it, but not going to jump into it. So we've got time for some of the maps. And then also for maybe further reading, geodesy and map transformations. Map transformations, we want to see a flat map and the earth is round. How do we lay it out? It's always a compromise. You could compromise area or distance. So certainly, at the Web Mercator here, at the North and South Pole, there's not that distance. It's very short by comparison. So you're stretching, you're compromising the distance at the North and South Pole. And maybe you're compromising at the equator too, in order to have a more uniform map. So but those are things you have to deal with when you map out data, is that transformation. And thankfully nowadays, like some GIS will do things in 3D, which is helpful. But when you can see one side of the globe, you can't see the other. So there's still kind of begs this need for, for a flat map. So, let's see here, and then some self-learning resources. And we'll just leave this up for a second. So certainly, like, the video could be paused, but there's this ebook, Geospatial Concepts, second edition, that is out there in the Spatial Science Commons. If you want to go deep, go pick up this book, and it will definitely help you out. So I want to jump into some sample maps. Dr. Khan, how much time do we have left? Maybe like 10, 15 minutes? Oops, you're on mute.
Yes, about 10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, all right, great. Well, let me end the presentation here. And can you guys, let's see here. Did I lose the? Oh no, it's still sharing. Okay, can you guys see a map in New York City?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So I went up to Kaggle and I gathered some data to put just, like, how do we map out data? What sort of questions might we answer with it? So here we have the 5 boroughs of New York, and I picked up some Airbnb data from Kaggle, and I picked up some New York City auto accidents data from Kaggle. And so let's suppose that, we wanted to, we had some time, we could take off work, we could go to New York City, maybe Monday to Friday, and we were trying to identify the best Airbnb location that was within our price range. But we were concerned about getting run over in New York City. And so, we want to pick one that is maybe not so in congested areas. So I tried to answer this, kind of this toy problem with some of the data here. So let's see. The data comes in CSV format, and it has latitude and longitude. I'll show you here quickly. And anything with latitude, longitude, most GIS software will, just natively map it. So I'm certain you could do this in Tableau. Obviously, I can do it here in ArcGIS Pro. And what it does is it takes a latitude and longitude and it turns it into a geographic point, and we can map that out. So I added in a little bit of color and size. The color is based on the borough, and the size is based on the number of people that Airbnb will accommodate. But there's 280,000 points here. So, how do we sift through all of this data to get to, the kind of the final answer? And so I'll show you that process here. So the next is I created a filtered view of the criteria that we would impose on the Airbnb location. So we want one that has some of these. It's got to be the entire apartment, entire home. They had a yurt in the list of options. We didn't want that, but apparently, like, it's a round tent. You might get in a more rural part, but apparently there's one in New York City. We want to accommodate between 6 and 12. We don't want it to be more than $1,000 a night. Hopefully a lot less. It needs to have a dishwasher and a washer so we can wash our own dishes, if we eat there and do our laundry. And so what that looks like when we apply some of that criteria, it takes it down a little bit, from 280,000. I think it's let's take a look here at the attribute table. So it's 6,300. So a little more manageable, but still too many to go through. So I put together a chart here of it's a box plot of the price by borough. Ideally we could stay on Manhattan because that's where a lot of the attractions are. But if Manhattan is so sky high in price, you probably would want to stay in one of the boroughs. And so we can see here that, it's okay. I think it's not that much more expensive than Brooklyn, or, Queens is cheaper. And Staten Island maybe a little bit far away. So really Brooklyn was probably the only choice, other choice. I guess Queens is kind of proximate, but it doesn't appear to have as many that meet the criteria we care about. So from there, I created a sub-selection of that is just Manhattan. And they're symbolized, let me take a look here. It is symbolized by accommodation. And what I found when I did a box plot of the price versus accommodates is there seems to be a threshold at 9 where the price goes up quite a bit. So that's where I chose my box size was 6 to 8 and then 9 to 12. So that's that's kind of the I don't want to say it's the final. It's a short list of the Airbnb locations on Manhattan that we might want to consider. But now we want to look at accident data. So I'll go ahead and shut that off. Let me make sure here. Time is off right now. So this is auto accidents for the 5 boroughs, and then I have the ability to animate it over time, but in the interest of time, I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna skip over that because there's a timestamp with each accident. We can go day by day and play the time slider and see where the accident happens. It's pretty random depending on the time of day. So let's move on to the next chart here. And so I created some additional plots, like what time of day do accidents happen and what day of the week do accidents happen. Let me turn this on here. So as you can imagine, people, are more alert in the morning and less alert in the afternoon. They want to get home. Both people in the cars and the people on foot want to get home. And so the most number of pedestrian injury accidents happens, between 6 and 7 p.m. in the evening. There is some interactivity here. We can see, when you click on the square where they happen, but again, they're kind of scattered all over about, we can't make a whole lot of sense of this. And then, back to like our borough question, is one borough have more accidents than other? we chose Manhattan. Manhattan's okay. It's not, it doesn't index high relative to Brooklyn. So feel good about our choice that Manhattan's the right one. But we do want to check the number of people that have been killed, because there's also, deaths involved in these. And again, Manhattan is low. So hopefully, maybe it's a function of just you can't go that fast in Manhattan because the congestion. Haven't chose the month we might want to go, but looking here at some of the statistics by month, we can see, the summer months are about mid. Interesting that the winter months are higher, but I suppose people maybe are cold and in a hurry to get across the street. And then the last one here, just a comparison by day of week. As any borough seemed to index more midweek versus not, and I didn't draw any hard conclusions from this chart, so they all kind of go up in the middle of the week. So from there, we can, we'll stick with Manhattan. So we've got our accident locations symbolized by number of people injured. And the next step, so this took a little bit of spatial processing. We'd say, like, we're probably not going to walk more than 2 miles. So for every Airbnb location, we want to identify all the accidents within 2 miles. So I created desire lines that connect the Airbnb location to every accident location within 2 miles. And I will show you what that looks like, but you can't make a lot of sense of it. So if we zoom in here, you can see all these desire lines kind of cut all over the place. It's a factorial problem. However many Airbnb times however many accident locations within 2 miles, is the total number of records. But from there, we can summarize some statistics about the Airbnb locations relative to the accidents are within 2 miles. And so what I've done here is for every Airbnb location, sum up just the total number of pedestrians that were injured, and then let's symbolize the map based on that. So you can see the darker colors are in proximity to more accidents than those of the lighter colors. From there, we can build a scatter chart off of that based on price versus number of pedestrians injured. And, maybe this is a risk versus how much we want to spend, proposition here. And so maybe our appetite is somewhere in the middle here. And so from there, we can highlight the locations in that portion of the chart and identify where they're at on the map. And maybe we decide, we want to do the Upper West Side, and this location and those locations seem reasonable. And so from there, I created a sub-selection, and we can get information on that and see that this is a location on the Upper West Side. They've got a lot of amenities. It accommodates 6. Price is not super high. You need to stay a minimum of 4 nights. And then the other location is this one here. And price is much cheaper, but you have to stay 30 nights. So it makes it kind of a no-brainer, to choose the other location. So that's the process of, kind of taking Airbnb data, accident data, and boiling it down to like, well, where would we like to stay in New York City for, for 5 days? So that is the first map I had to show. Dr. Khan, how am I doing on time?
So I think we have 2 more minutes before we start the Q&A.
Okay. Well, let me I've got a quick map. I had another one prepared as Boston Bike Share, but I'll just carry on with this map here. So I mentioned the digital twin. You can get 3D data online through the Esri ArcGIS online portal. So I took the New York City accident locations and Airbnb locations and pulled them into a 3D scene here. So let me show the Airbnb locations first. This might take a second to draw. My fan is spinning like crazy on my computer right now because of the compute power needed just to map out, 3D buildings in New York City. So you kind of get some idea, of the awareness. Now, I don't have the Airbnb locations positioned to the proper place in the building. It's just based on the street address. They gave us like the number of floors. We could compute an elevation, maybe make the building semi-transparent and see where that, approximately where that apartment was located. But, you see here, you get an idea of context when you're in the environment. So maybe bridging this over to social media analytics, if you had like I want to say a tweet location, do we call it an X location now? I don't know. But let's say we had a tweet location, somebody shared that, you could see where they were, within the urban environment in which they were, sending out the tweet. Then you can geo-enrich, based on information from that urban environment. It would help you gain more insights. Yeah, I think that uses the last 2 minutes. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and I guess I will open it up for questions.
Thank you very much, Greg, for that insightful presentation. I know there was a lot to soak in, but this, I hope, is a very good introduction to ArcGIS and geospatial analytics and what it can do for us in different domains. So when we have geographical data, you can imagine how interdisciplinary this domain is. It applies to so many different areas, especially ours, what we're looking at, the kind of issues that we discuss in social media analytics as well. So I'll start off with a quick question. So I remember back in those days when I was doing my MBA a long time ago, I was working with ArcGIS for marketing data, how we can improve our marketing efforts using ArcGIS, and it's a very powerful tool. So my question is, Greg, how do you see the future developments and in terms of the methods and techniques that are employed by ArcGIS, especially with the AI tools that are out there, and what kind of an impact is that going to have on this domain?
Yeah, so let me play the question back. So how is Esri's technology going to advance spatial data science? Is that kind of the crux of it?
Yes.
Yeah. So having lived in the Esri and open source world, I'll tell you that Esri has some statistical methods under the hood of some of their tools that are not easily written or put together with open source packages. So one that comes to mind is there is, I want to say it's a clustering algorithm that uses a genetic algorithm under the hood. And so, Esri is very intentional about bringing together folks who are experts in the theory, as well as those who are deep in the computer science in order to build these tools. So I would see those who want velocity of development and advancements are going to lean on, the value that Esri provides. Those who, that want to, not have like that technical debt, or maybe it's more financial debt of always having to pay license fees, is going to, do, the open source route. But I will tell you from my own personal experience, their software is very advanced, and it does fit a variety of workflows. So.
Okay. Any questions from the audience?
Yeah, I was going to ask about the barriers to getting geospatial data, like from a research standpoint. Obviously, depending on who you're working for and what type of accessibility you have to that data, and maybe how you could overcome those barriers. Whether it's, maybe suggestions for like public researchers or people working in academia.
So data for research, there's probably a couple of avenues. So certainly it depends on the domain. If it's a social sciences domain, you would need to partner with whoever, collected that information. If it's more of an industry domain, forming partnerships with, businesses in that industry and signing NDAs, so that you can research the data that they collect, is probably the most common path. And there's always challenges with that because, it's any business relationship needs to be mutually beneficial. So, how is the business going to benefit from the research conducted, in the academic domain? And then of course, if it's a domain like weather, there's a plethora of data out there, for research, like almost an overwhelming quantity. And the challenge there is not can we find data for it, but can we put together adequate compute resources in order to extract out of it what we need. So that the challenge there is, hey, we need to know how to use, the cloud in order to churn through the information. So does that help answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And now I'm thinking about, you'd be limited to certain types of research depending on if you're looking at something harmful and it's not favorable to the company or organization you're working with, that could be a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are kind of questions that need to be vetted up front, and thought out and addressed, before work starts. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Thank you, Trenton. Any other questions?
Yeah. So I wanted to ask that how accurate is the geospatial data, the one that you have shown in the map? So it's clear that you have collected it from some of the data storage or some data open websites. So yeah, that is the question.
Yeah, a great question. Actually, I have some prior experience before going to starting at Nationwide about this. So any GPS collected data, it's subject to a variety of influences that would cause error. The most common is this thing called multipath reflection. So GPS in a city, the signal bounces off of buildings and it'll reposition you. And so let's say you have like a telematics device in your car and you drive through downtown New York City, it might put you like a couple streets away because of the GPS error. So common, and it's like instantaneous error. And there's ways to control it, but you can't always like trust the vehicle path. If you actually model like the dynamics, acceleration forward, back, and turning directly from the path, the occupants wouldn't be able to survive the level of acceleration they might, or deceleration they might see based on the GPS data. So lots of error in GPS data depends on the receiver quality. There's also this thing called post processing or real-time correction. So you can correct it like real time with there's beacons that will say, hey, in Central Ohio, it is off about 10 meters, in the X direction and 5 meters in the Y direction. It'll reposition it. But again, it still depends on the quality of the GPS receiver. There's another source of pertinent information that would come from like geocoding. So you know where the address is, you feed the address into the geocoding engine and it'll say it is at this latitude and longitude. And there can be like rooftop precision, there could be street frontage precision, there could be interpolated street frontage precision. So it doesn't always get it exactly right. And understanding the geocoder accuracy is really critical. So great question. And definitely, whenever you get some spatial data, understand, the level of geographic accuracy contained in that spatial information.
Thank you. So
Yeah.
we have time for one more question, and that is going to be by Emmanuel. Emmanuel, you're muted, so you can unmute and-
Yes, I wanted to find out from the speaker, I mean, he showed an illustrative example where you have locations with accidents and other incidents. I wanted to find out if institutions like insurance company, from his bio, he worked with an insurance company, if they factor these data or information in the pricing of the product.
So you're curious if accident locations are factored into the pricing of
Yeah,
insurance
but based on these
policy?
data that you gather, are they factored into the pricing of the product and services of the various institutions?
Yeah, so great question. The data that I used was from Kaggle, and we do not use that in factoring in any of our pricing. The data from Kaggle. Unfortunately, the product pricing domain is not an area of expertise for me. So certainly, individual accident history would matter, within pricing of insurance. And then, beyond that, like, more larger geography, accident frequency. I unfortunately cannot, I cannot answer your question with adequate detail. So, but certainly accidents, if I have an accident, and I'm at fault, or even if I'm not at fault, my rate, if I'm not at fault, my rate may go up a little bit. If I'm at fault, my rate is definitely going to go up more. And some companies have, they have accident forgiveness, so they give you like one pass, which is very nice. But it just depends on the carrier, through which you buy your insurance. So.
All right, well, thank you. So here we're actually ahead of time, so thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure this was a wonderful learning experience for the audience as well. And thank you again, Greg. Hopefully we will have some other sessions in future. With this, we'll conclude our session for today.